Have you been told you need to stop doing what you love, whether it's exercise, running, or a sport? Well, here at Dynamic, we don't like that answer. In this podcast, we'll talk to leaders in the health and wellness space from Southwest Florida to get the solutions you need to get you back to doing what you love. Welcome to the Dynamic Naples Podcast. Okay, John, are you ready?
I'm ready. I'm always ready. What?
So you had something you want to discuss?
Yeah, so I watched this video and then I made you watch it by this guy, Conor Harris on Instagram. I want to give him a shout out because I do actually like his content. This will just be a little bit of a moment to disagree with one of his perspectives, but I don't disagree with all of his stuff, just this one particular thing. CONOR _ Harris, HARRIS _ just to give him a little shout out. He's pretty popular. He's got like 75,000 followers. I've been following him for a while. And he's been doing a really nice job creating Instagram Reels. And his Instagram Reels are like very biomechanics heavy, so they're fun to watch, especially if you're into that sort of thing. But he put one out a few days ago. And it's why wedges are greater than plates for squat depth. So if you don't know this already, if you go to squat and you have limited ankle mobility, or if you just want to activate the quads more, you'll elevate your heels with like plates or with a calf board or with a platform or whatever. Great way to get a little more depth in your squat. You can pretty much notice it immediately. And if you already have a ton of ankle mobility, you can actually elevate your heels even more just to like make them really quad dominant, which is fun. But he makes a very interesting claim here about internal rotation, and I kind of want to talk about it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play his video into my microphone. I'll try to be careful not to play too loud so you guys can hear it, and then Christopher and I will discuss the implications of what he said. So here, I'll play it now.
For heel elevation in a squat, a wedge is probably a better option, and here's why. Other than just better stability, a wedge allows for your foot to go into the joint actions needed to produce force. As we approach parallel in our squat, our hip is going to move closer to internal rotation. This internal rotation feeds down the chain into our tibia and our shin, which is paired with pronation of the foot. This pronation of the foot allows us to drive force down into the ground as we come up out of that squat. Pronation occurs when the whole foot is flat on the ground after heel strike, and then we go into internal rotation in mid-stance. With a plate, there's limited reference for your arch to drop down into, so pronation will be harder to achieve. With a wedge that allows your whole foot to be flat, you can achieve better reference for pronation into the ground. Now, I'm not saying everyone needs this, nor is it going to put 100 pounds on your squat, but for a lot of people, it will help them be more efficient and feel a little bit better when they do squats. If you've been using plates for heel...
So there what he basically says is the reason why a platform is better than a plate is because it's a better reference for your foot to push off of. But then he's also saying as you go down in a squat, you're going into more internal rotation and then pronation at the foot. The reason why I have some trouble with this is because that's the exact opposite of what I teach people to do.
Yeah, me too. Complete opposite.
So let's just draw the picture for people. So what he's doing is when you go down in a squat, he's saying as you go down, your knees go in. As a result, your arch of your foot collapses. This is the pronation that he's talking about. And then you push up from this internally rotated position where your knees are in, your foot's flat on the ground.
Yeah, I mean, that's basically what I see people doing a lot as a compensation, especially when you overload them. I'm generally trying to get them away from that position. Now, to be clear, I don't think there's necessarily like a right way and a wrong way to squat. I think there's better ways and worse ways, right? So, I mean, I think you can squat with your knees in and your foot pronated and flat. It just doesn't look very pretty. It potentially could set you up for some irritation, maybe even injury. You got to think about what's happening. The knee's going into rotation. You're potentially exposing meniscus. Not to fearmonger, but I just think that that's not the most ideal way to squat.
Yeah, and it's kind of the exact thing I teach people not to do. It's one of the things I'm looking for when people squat to tell them, hey, don't do this anymore. The thing I'm telling them to do, I typically look up the chain from the bottom up and then sort of see where the issues are. I start at the foot, then I go to the knee, then I go at the hip, and then I go to like the thoracic spine and out from there. And so I make my clients, my members here at the gym, take off their shoes to squat, and then I'm watching their feet. And I'm watching like the arch of their foot and seeing what happens there. Because what you can see is a lot of people when they don't have a lot of usually hip and glute strength is their knees will go in. As a result, the arch of their foot will collapse and their toes, their big toe will turn out. it'll adduct, right? Abduct would be going away from the foot. Adduct would be going into the rest of the toes. So I'm trying to prevent that. And my main cue is get your knees out, and then to really solidify everything is to find a nice neutral pelvis as you go to squat. So yeah, it's what he's saying there. I agree you should be squatting on a platform versus plates, but not to more properly pronate. I want you to supinate more.
Well, so this is the way I see that whole pattern of the knee collapse, the femur going into internal rotation, the flat foot, the pronated foot. I see that as a way to rest on your own tissues in a sense instead of being more active with your muscle. So, in other words, you have a passive system and an active system in your body. The passive system is things like your ligaments and your joints and your capsules, and your active system is more muscle and tendon. So if you were to just bend over and just kind of keep everything relaxed and round your back, you're kind of hanging on to your passive system. I'm giving an analogy. The passive system of your body. So all the ligaments that hold the spine together, they're what's keeping you together in that moment. If you're more flat-backed and you're active and engaged in your core, that's more of an active system, right? So the same thing applies here with the internal rotation. You're basically winding up the capsule of the hip. That pronated position of the foot, you're just basically collapsing onto the floor, and that's what you're using as stability. That may work, and you can, if your goal is to lift the most amount of weight possible, that there are like power lifters that do that, right, basically. But I think you're going to sacrifice things doing that. If you do that all the time, you can really create irritation of the joints.
Yeah, it's just not really something I see, apart from just wanting to prevent shearing force at the knee and plantar fasciitis at the foot, and I want to increase glute strength. It's just not something I even see at the powerlifting level. I see a lot of external rotation there. Now, I see some people when they're lifting heavy weight, they'll collapse in internal rotation, but I see that as a compensation for weakness. Yeah. I don't see that as a like, okay, you're stronger, so therefore you're...
No, that's what I mean. It's like they're tension hunting, right? So if they run out of steam in the muscle, they can collapse into a passive system. But again, that's going to put tissues at risk. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I agree. Externally rotate, knees out. You want to create an arch. You don't want a flat foot. I think that's a better position to be in.
Can we talk specifically about, maybe in a little more detail than people are used to, why tons of internal rotation plus load is bad for the knee?
Internal rotation of what? Of the hip?
Of the hip and then down to the knee, and then why that would be an issue with load.
Well, so you're just not setting the joint up in the way it's supposed to work, right? I think you can do it. And look, our bodies can adapt to anything. I think you could train your body to do that if you really want to. But if you think about, the screw home mechanism, so as your leg goes into a straighter position, the shin externally rotates, and as you bend it, it internally rotates. So there is a degree of rotation at the knee as well. So depending on what you do with your femur, it's going to change the rotation of the knee. And now you've got the tibial plateau changing position, right? So you've got your shin bone, on top of it's two menisci, right? And the way the knee works kind of best is if it's lined up so that the heads of the epicondyles of the femur, they roll on the meniscus. If you create a lot of rotation by going into rotation of femur, now you've changed the relationship of the femur to the shin, and now maybe you're kind of catching edges of the meniscus. So that's one thing that may not be the best thing. The other thing too is now the MCL, so the ligament on the inside of your knee, is under more valgus stress. So theoretically, over time, I guess there's kind of two schools of thought here. Over time, maybe you're going to overstretch that ligament, and it's not meant to be stretched, and create some laxity, or maybe you'll create a thickening of that ligament. That's Wolff's law. So that's kind of a whole different debate there. But you're just putting a lot of strain through those tissues.
Now, why wouldn't let's say you're going to do a ton of external rotation. Not a ton, but external rotation.
More than just knees out?
No, let's say like knees out, right? Okay. Why wouldn't that do the same thing, but just like on the inverse tissues?
I think if you went far enough, it would. Mm-hmm. I think knees out is basically as close to our neutral as possible.
Right.
That's what I mean. So if you want real extreme with it, I'm sure you could create same sort of, torque at the knee, and in that case would be varus stress on the LCL. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't see why it'd be any different.
Yeah, and then the reason where, when your knees are rotated out, you're into some sort of external rotation at the hip, because of that shin also being externally rotated, now you're in a nice straight line for good things to happen.
Yeah, and so, what I say, like, as close to neutral as possible is that sort of externally rotated position. I guess it's relative. Look at the angle of the socket of the hip, right? It's not completely straight out. It's got a certain amount of degree turned. Mm-hmm. And I think that sets us up for that. What looks like external rotations really are neutral. Mm-hmm. Now, that being said, everyone's got different degrees of, that angle of their hip. So everyone's anatomy is a little bit different.
Yeah, I want to talk just quickly. So give me a quick detour, and then we'll find our way back. But it's completely related. Do you ever watch those? I watched like one of these videos, and people are like obsessed with them. They get hundreds of millions of views on YouTube. They're these guys in like, I don't know, South America, just like the woods, mm-hmm. and they make these like really crazy little houses in the woods. Have you ever seen these videos?
No.
They make these like little. So they'll just have a stick, right? Literally just one stick, and they build these little like one-room homes that have like little water fountains and like pools. It's kind of crazy. But they're these guys who like live in the woods, mm-hmm. and so they're spending their whole time like digging in the dirt in like a perfect deep squat, incredible ankle mobility. And there you can see all of them, like their knees are outside of their hip width, right? Because they're, like you talked about, the hip capsules pointed out a little bit. Mm-hmm. Their femurs go in that direction, then they're going straight down. And they have tons of ankle mobility, so they can get a lot of external rotation at their shin as well. Mm-hmm. But yeah, if you've ever seen those videos, anybody who's listening is like, yeah, I've seen that. Look at them squat and look at like when they're digging into the ground. They're in like perfect squats. And yeah, I just think those are the positions that we should be able to find ourselves in.
Yeah, and I bet none of those guys have knee pain, I bet.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. I mean,
I'm going to show you one of those videos after this. You'll see it. You'll laugh.
Well, the other thing, too, going back to Conor's idea of hip internal rotation, I mean, at some point, you just run into your own torso. If you, right, your leg has to get away out of the way of your torso. If you're in internal rotation, you're just going to ram up against soft tissue.
Yeah, if you're squatting and your chest is going towards the ground and your knees are either straight or in, you're just going to bump your stomach into your thighs.
Well, and just look at other creatures like cats or dogs. When they're laying on their stomach, they're, the same thing. That's knees out, basically. Mm-hmm. That's external rotation. They're not internally rotated.
Yeah. Yeah, no, completely agree. And the other thing that I think about when I'm thinking about knees out, one of the reasons I want some external rotation in the squat is because I want some external rotation torque to further activate the glutes, which are going to help me extend my hips and stand up more effectively and efficiently.
Yeah, I do think external rotation is going to be a way more stable position. I think we kind of did that test the other day where if you go into a squat and...
Yeah, this was a good one. Describe what you did to me.
I told you go into the bottom of a squat, and I had you internally rotate the femur. And
you started with me externally rotated. Then what did you do?
Yeah, so I had his knees out, and I said, just resist me, and I pushed his knee from the outside in, and I couldn't push it. But then from when he went to internally rotated position of the femur, it's much easier to make that knee collapse even further with a little bit of external pressure. So that just illuminates the fact that external rotation is a much more stable position.
Yeah, so I went into a squat, like a normal squat, as I would do it, and he pushed on my knee laterally, so from the outside pushing in, and I was fine. And then he had me just turn my knee in, and then he pushed it, and I fell over.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I immediately felt compromised. But yeah, I just think long term, trying to get your joints in those positions would be a better approach. I agree with his conclusion that squatting on a platform, like a flat platform, is better than squatting with your heel on a plate. But yeah, I don't agree with the internal rotation and the pronation. I'm trying to get away from pronation and internal rotation.
Yeah, unless we're not understanding something about the way he described it, I don't know. I mean, I think there's nothing wrong with I think it was a slant board that he was on or wedge, right?
Yeah, it was a wedge.
There's nothing wrong with that. Yeah, that's going to, they'll buy you some slack in your probably stiff ankles, right? That's fine, whatever. You still want to mobilize your ankles, but if you don't have full ankle mobility, that may be one workaround. Then having the full flat surface, well, technically you have more tactile feedback on your feet. Probably a good idea to have that. I imagine squatting with your heels on a weight, on a plate, creates kind of a leverage point or like a shearing of basically your calcaneus.
One thing is it's just uncomfortable.
Yeah, that's kind
like
of what I mean.
The edge of the plate kind of digs in to your heel, and it's kind of hard to produce a lot of force when you're in some sort of discomfort somewhere.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was saying. So I think you could shear the fascia maybe, and I don't know, maybe irritate it under enough load. So I think there's nothing wrong with that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, especially if you're going to squat in your socks or barefoot, which you should probably try to be doing more of, and you put your heel on a plate, that's just going to be uncomfortable. It's going to be painful. But let's just talk about like the benefits of squatting heels elevated versus flat foot, or just like why you would ever do it. One of the reasons is going to be just to not improve your ankle mobility, but give you a compensation for poor ankle mobility. And the reason it's good, especially in the beginning, if you haven't improved your ankle mobility enough to squat to depth, which is either your hip below your knee line, comfortably, you want to be able to learn what those positions feel like at the hip and the knee joint, even if you can't find them at the ankle yet, with a nice balanced foot. So doing this, especially in the beginning, if you're just starting your journey of weightlifting and you're just trying to improve your ankle mobility now, squatting with your heels elevated can actually help you find those positions a lot easier, because to be quite honest, when you have enough ankle range of motion, it's easy for everybody to find a good position in a squat. The only thing holding most people back is their ankles. So being able to know where those good positions are as we're working on your ankle mobility can help. But as an example, today I was doing barbell back squats, flat foot, and then I did some heel elevated front rack squats after. And the whole goal of doing the heels elevated squats for me at that point was to just really fire up my quads. I was just trying to get some hypertrophy in my quads. And I had a front rack. I was holding 2 dumbbells at my chest just to, again, load the anterior part of my body instead of the posterior. So there's 2 reasons. One would be just more anterior loading, and then the other reason would be to compensate for a lack of ankle mobility and finding good positions without it.
Yeah, no, I agree. So one thing I see a lot is people developing back pain in squatting, and it's usually because of their ankles. Because if you're missing kind of what John was talking about, missing ankle range of motion, as you get deeper into your squat, you're going to feel like you need to fall backwards, right? Because you're just running out of space in your ankles. Your calves are pushing you back. So what people do as a compensation, well, there's a lot of different ways to compensate, but one of the typical ones is to sort of hinge at the waist more, so you're not as upright in the torso. And then, that, of course, now your back is taking on a lot more load. So a lot of times when I have someone complain about back pain and squatting, the first thing I do is look at their ankles. So to put them on a slant board or a wedge of some sort is going to take away that missing range of motion, and now you can squat a little more upright. So I guess that'd be kind of a third. It's kind of what you're already saying, but it's kind of a third reason to squat on a wedge.
Yeah, and one thing that's going to happen too if you're missing that ankle range of motion is you're not going to be able to find a balanced foot when you try to squat low. You're going to be on your heels because, like you just said, the ankles are going to push you back. They're going to keep your shin angle upright, right? So as you squat, you're not going to be able to drive your knee forward. So you're not going to be able to get any weight into the ball of your foot or your big toe. That way you're going to be squatting on your heels. And what I see a lot of too is when people go to squat and they're on their heels, is right as they start to drive up, the first thing that happens is their butt goes up in the air. And then they unfold. Then they unfold from the hinge. So they extend their knees first, and then they extend their hips. And that just adds even more loading to the lower spine, which can cause some problems.
Yep, no, I agree. Yeah, it's all about how do you compensate? Do you hinge at the waist? Do you turn your feet out? Or do your heels rise? So the turn your feet out one, by the way, kind of is what Conor was talking about, as he was saying, is like going to be a good position. So turn the feet out is going to be the same thing as pronation, which tends to set the knee up into a valgus position, so internal rotation of the hip. So that whole thing that he was saying is also just a compensation that we see for limited range of motion.
Mm-hmm. All right. Do we want to keep beating this dead horse, or do we think we've we fully
I think we covered
examined
it.
the conversation.
I think we covered it. I've never seen any of Conor's stuff besides this, so my apologies if we disagree. But
yeah, go follow him because he's got a lot of cool stuff. What he does is he has like a skeleton that he'll use, and he'll sort of demonstrate some stuff with the skeleton. But then he has like individual joints that he'll use and manipulate to show you like, hey, this is why we do this thing and that thing. And most of the time, I agree with him. This was one of the times where I didn't. So, yeah, definitely no hate for Conor. I like his stuff, but I definitely wanted to have this conversation because I thought it was a good one. And he got a lot of views, and I'd like to sort of...
Ride his wave?
No, because I don't think we're going to get views because of Conor. No, I just like to... Because I was looking at the comments, too, and all the comments were positive. Nobody was disagreeing. And I'd like to have the counterpoint because I do have one.
Yeah, I'd love to get his reaction to this, see if maybe we were misunderstanding something he said.
Mm-hmm.
But
yeah, maybe I'll send it over to him.
Yeah, cool. All right, well, I guess that's a wrap on this one.
Yeah.
All right, John, next time.
Yeah, bye. See you later.
See you, bye. Do you have unexplained pain, or do you wonder just how healthy you are? When was the last time you had your blood tested? Blood chemistry analysis is a great way to stay ahead of any health conditions, and now you can have control of your health with Let's Get Checked. Let's Get Checked is an incredible company that sends blood tests to your home. You can choose from over 30 different tests, whether that's liver function, testosterone, micronutrient, cholesterol, or C-reactive protein, which is a marker for inflammation. It's sent to you with free shipping, and you get your results in 2 to 5 days, no physician referral needed. Use the code DPT30 for 30% off. Go to letsgetchecked.com and use the code DPT30. Did you know that you can get started with physical therapy without a physician's referral? Physical therapists don't just solve pain, we get down to the root cause and keep it from coming back. We also discuss all things health, such as nutrition and lifestyle changes. If you feel that you could use some help, let's get on a free consult call. Go to www.dynamicnaples.com and sign up for a free call. Also, if you like this podcast, please give us a rating wherever you listen to podcasts. It helps us spread the message. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week.